to have our amazing visionary city manager, Raymond Lee, come out and just say a few words, and then I'll come back.
Julianne is always so kind with her words and that she uses as she introduces people. But first of all, I just want to welcome everybody to the city of Amarillo. It's glad to see you. I mean, city of Greeley. She's Amarillo in the past, but the city of Greeley. I really appreciate everyone being here today. This is a great event that is truly showing how much people truly care about some of our most vulnerable population from that standpoint. You know, with everything that is going on in our society and everything that is happening in our world today, we need a lot of love and a lot of care for people who are in our most need and our most vulnerable from that standpoint. So we're very glad that Dr. Tsemberis is here today to really give us some insight and some wisdom on the Housing First model from that standpoint. So everybody, I hope you're in for a treat today. I know this will be a very informative, and I hope for a lot of you changing how you may look or feel about how many ways that we can look at how we address homelessness in our communities and also in our cities as well. This is not an approach that I would think any of us see it as a one-shoe-fits-all, or even an approach where we can say one entity can really help solve this issue at hand. It's going to take everyone in this room as partners, as regional partners, as community partners to really help shape the model that we move forward to address homelessness in all of our communities as a whole. So thank you for being here today. Welcome to the city of Greeley. I hope this is a treat for you as you're visiting with us today. And if you need anything, please be on the lookout for city employees and representatives that can kind of show you the way. One little thing too, I would like to recognize our electeds in the audience as well too, as I see two sitting in the very front, and we also have our council members here as well too. So it's always good to have some electeds in the room when we're having these conversations, so we can all be on the same page. So thank you for your time, thank you for your travel, thank you for being engaged in this most critical conversation on homelessness in all of our communities. So thank you.
Okay, before we get started, I'm going to show a few slides about what the city of Greeley is currently doing, what our role is, and our vision at this point. And then I will introduce Dr. Tsemberis. So before we do that, though, I would like to ask people who, if you don't live in the city of Greeley, please raise your hand. Woo! All right, I love it. I love it. That was one of our goals, is we wanted to make sure that this was advertised and people understood, welcome, come to Greeley, because as we talk about frequently, we need to think not just Greeley, not just our local area, but regionally. You know, that is our continuum of care, is 2 counties. So I love, love, love that you all took the time and made the trip. I will also say, we have this thank you up here because our Greeley downtown businesses, incredible generosity, you'll see in your bag, so like, don't just throw those away. Right? I know sometimes that happens, you get a bag at a conference, whatever. But you have coupons in there for these different businesses. So go check it out, right? This ends at 4:45. Go have a drink, happy hour, and enjoy. Because I will say, so I'm new to Colorado, I'm new to Greeley, and I absolutely love it. And one of the things, though, that I've heard from a few people is Greeley, that cow town. Guess what? We love cows, we love beef, but we're a lot more than that cow town. So, exactly what I said. What is the city currently doing, and what is our role? So, I will say that we understand that part of our role is to provide leadership. Leadership in conjunction and in collaboration with all of our partners who have already been blazing that trail. And so we are joining along with you. And in terms of what that really means, so a very concrete strategy that we are starting up is the Mayor's Task Force on Homelessness. And I've talked to several people that are kind of on the list that we are that we will be inviting. Thank God, everyone has said yes so far, but we haven't been able to contact everyone yet, and you will be receiving a letter. And we're doing this because we're bringing together our community leaders from across all sectors, from our faith-based community, from our business community, from our not-for-profit community. You know, we have, because every place that I've seen that has really moved the mark on homelessness, no one group can do it, right? It has to be the collective. And it's also not just here, right? We need our county, we need our state, we need our federal partners also to be involved. And so that is the makeup of the Mayor's Task Force. And in terms of our actual sort of concrete goals, first is developing with this group an outreach and inreach team. Right now, we have a few outreach services in Greeley, but certainly, and I'm sure they would say the same thing, not enough to meet the need and the demand. And so the goal is to have an outreach team 7 days a week that's working like 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. 2 shifts, big van, number on the side that you can call. Because currently what happens is people will call the Housing Navigation Center, they'll call, you know, the mayor or Public Works, and then my team is very focused on serving, they have these 60 individuals. Of course we're gonna respond, but we need, it deserves, and the people who need the outreach deserve to have a dedicated team. So, we also understand that housing, if we don't have housing, you know, we're done. Right now, the main source of housing in the city of Greeley comes from our continuum of care. And our continuum of care, no continuum of care has ever provide enough of the housing dollars. They're always supposed to be matched. But currently, at most, there's 1, maybe 2 slots a month. And our last pull from HMIS that I'm aware of, we had 462 people. That'll be 19 years, if no one else became homeless. So that is absolutely a charge of the Mayor's Task Force. And you're gonna hear this from Sam, you can't just have housing. We've gotta have the services that match the needs of that person. And it's community-based. This is not office-based, right? And so increasing that, as well as in Greeley, the only like emergency shelter where you can go in and no questions asked, looking at behavior, obviously if your behavior is out of control, different story, happens during the winter over at the Housing Navigation Center. We spend so many dollars on having to move encampments, especially during the summertime. I understand. There are times where it's absolutely public health crisis. It's not good. It's not good for anyone. It's not good for that business. It's not good for when the E. coli is going up in the river, and it's certainly not good for the person experiencing homelessness. But we have to have a place for people to go 365 that is safe and that they can actually take those steps to move on to housing. So, and then, who knows if this is actually a good thing in the leadership, they hired me. But at least the city is committed, right? They hired a person at the assistant city manager level because that's how important it is. I mean, all of this stuff has really nothing to do with me. It was the city manager, it was the city council, it was the community saying, we need you to partner with us. and the city council hearing that and making it happen. So, then another part of our role is definitely education and implementation on best practices. And the main best practice right now that the city is employing is housing first. We are focused on serving 60 people who have high needs, have a level of complexity, and we're providing case management services, and the ratio is, so for each case manager we have, they are serving 12 people. They are seeing people, especially when they first move in. It might be every day. It could be twice a day. And it's not in the visits start in the home, and then we're going to the, mental health appointment. We're going to the grocery store. And each person is an individual, right? And so that is part of the intervention as well. And in terms of funding, I get this question a lot. Because the city provided $1 million plus. What the heck was that $1 million plus for? Homelessness hasn't gone away. I know, I'm sorry. But what I will say is originally it was to serve 30 people because half of those dollars were going to be used for a rental subsidy. Thank goodness to Office of Supportive Housing at the state, they provided us through a grant 60 vouchers. These are permanent rental subsidies as long as the person meets the income requirement, right? They get a job, they go to income, they don't need that anymore. But the people that we're serving, many of them will need it permanently. And so conservatively, once all those vouchers are filled, that's $750,000 going in to Greeley community, our private landlords, because we're using vouchers, we're working with landlords. So just putting that out there. And it also, fortunately, the grant came with deposits and a little extra to provide incentives for landlords, because we understand they are our partner too, right? It's also a risk for our landlords. And we're saying, give us a shot. It's our business. It's how they feed their family. We also have to be taking care of them as well. So, and then what the city's portion was, we were able to expand. And so instead of serving 30, we're able to serve 60. And instead of using half of it for 1 year of rent, we expanded our team so that we could maintain that staff to client caseload ratio. And part of it is startup and operations. So what we're gonna do now is I'm gonna introduce Tsemberis, and he's gonna come up and really, he's the show. He's the reason we're all here. He's the reason I'm here. He is, I've known Sam since 2005. It changed my life. By being able to work with him and sort of follow him around through Canada, across the US, as Housing First was really becoming popular, because oftentimes political leaders understood the cost savings of placing someone in housing versus leaving them on the street. And I will be forever grateful, and I will never be able to express that gratitude enough. So, but his official bio is Tsemberis, PhD, clinical community psychologist who originated the Housing First model, an evidence-based program with a well-documented record for effectively ending homelessness for individuals diagnosed with mental illness and addiction. Housing First programs are successfully implemented across the US, Canada, Europe, Australia, and New Zealand. I wish I got to go with you to New Zealand. There's still hope for that. Dr. Tsemberis has decades of experience in operations, training, and research, and currently serves as the CEO of the Pathways Housing First Institute. He's also on faculty at UCLA Department of Psychiatry, and he's the executive director executive director of the VA Center of Excellence for Veterans Homelessness and Recovery. He's published extensively on topics mental health, addiction, homelessness, and received broad recognition for his work from the American Psychiatric and American Psychological Associations, the National Alliance, and many, many others. So please help me in welcoming Dr. Tsemberis.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much, Juliana. That was a lovely introduction. I have to say that she says that she followed me to all of these different places, but one of the things about the dissemination of this Housing First program is that people summoned us, because there's lots of people that believe in the values of empowering people with mental health problems and giving them a chance, and there weren't opportunities in those communities to manifest a program that was consistent with people's values. So we were invited to places that were all ready to change, and we sort of facilitated that change rather than going and creating the change. It's an honor to be here, and thank you all for coming. A little nervous, it's like a big group and it's like very formal, But my purpose really is to explain what we mean by homelessness and what the Housing First program is. It's an interesting time because this program has been around for 2-3 decades, and it's suddenly controversial because there are articles and policy moves to move back to a system of treatment first and then housing, which is sort of troubling in some ways. And what makes this kind of meeting even more important, so that we're all understanding what we're talking about when we say housing first, it's this, and it's when it's treatment first, it's that, so at least we can have some clarity on the terms. I am curious about who is here. How many people do not work in homeless services? Okay, thank you for that. You don't have to show hands for this, but I am curious about how many people are over 50 or under 50, because it's a huge issue for my generation, because for people that are under 50 or under 40, they have grown up with the idea that homelessness is part of the landscape. They don't remember when homelessness wasn't around. We've had it now for 30 years. And I feel a certain desperation to end homelessness, because I don't want the next generation growing up thinking that homelessness is part of the landscape. Well, I'm very impressed that so many people are here who are not in the business, so to speak. So my agenda for the presentation today is to basically talk about homelessness and what we mean by it and how it came to be, the root causes. There's still controversy about that. And talk about traditional approaches to homelessness. Talk about what the Housing First model is. And then spend a little time also talking about what the Housing First program is versus using a Housing First approach citywide or even greater county, and as they do in Europe. And several of the European countries have done this already, sort of a national policy, but not the way we have national policy here, just kind of like it's our policy, actually funding housing and services to make that policy a reality. And countries, especially in the northern part, Finland, Sweden, Norway, have pretty much ended sort of street homelessness. And the Netherlands are not far behind, which is important just to say because it can be done. This is not theoretical. It's happening in some places, and what it takes is not that complicated. That's the other thing about this, which is I find a source of frustration, actually, that we're not talking about Alzheimer's disease here. We're not talking about some cancer we don't know the treatment for. We're talking about an issue we can actually solve if we had the political will and put the resources in place to do it. And then after the break, we're going to have a presentation by the Housing First team here in Greeley, which is really a highlight because I can tell you about the program, but they will present some of the people that they're working with right from the city, and you will see how the program works. There's two major approaches to defining root causes. And the most predominant one is sort of the individual personal characteristics model. And it's understandable because, you know, we are captivated by what we see in front of us. And what we see in front of us when we see people experiencing homelessness is they're poor, you know, they have problems in addition to being poor, they're manifesting psychiatric symptoms and so on. And so the attribution that was made initially and continues to be made about how this person got to be this way is that it had something to do with their lifestyle, their choices. They stopped treatment, they squandered their money, their addiction got out of control, so that it had something to do with their poor choices that led them there. The other approach is a more macro approach, which I will also present, which talks about the larger forces in terms of you know, rent affordability, deinstitutionalization, and rent. What we're really consistent and diligent about at the federal level is counting homelessness. And every year we do this what's called a point-in-time count done by HUD. And in last year's count, we had 580,000. Typically, most communities count homelessness the third Thursday in January from midnight to 7 a.m. So we don't really want to know how many people are out there. So we want, like, this is like the minimal number you would get. So the 580,000 nationally is quite an underrepresentation, especially in light of the fact that many people are homeless for 6 to 8 weeks or 12 weeks and then they're not. So there's a group that goes in and out of homelessness probably 3 times in the course of a calendar year. Leaving all that aside, this is the kind of data we come up with. It's 580,000 in 2022, and it's been steadily increasing for the last 5 years at least. And as the numbers grow and more people experiencing homelessness become more visible in the cities, public tolerance for homelessness is decreasing. And one of the things I want to point out is that it's not evenly distributed across the country. As you can see, the darker states on the West Coast, from Seattle down to San Diego, Texas, Florida, Massachusetts, New York, Chicago, Colorado, you're right there in the middle, not quite light gray, but getting there. So if, you know, one of the theories is that if it's mental illness or addiction, you know, those kinds of problems are not distributed in a geographic pattern that looks like this. So something else is going on. Because if it was an individual problem, you would see the same level of, this is proportional to population, these numbers. You would see the same numbers across the map, and we don't see that. So there's something else going on. One of the things that the data consistently shows is that minorities are overrepresented anywhere between 2 and 10 times in the population that's homeless relative to their representation in the city or the state that they're in. In this particular count here in Greeley, it's primarily the overrepresentation of Hispanic and Native American. People who are counted as homeless are quite diverse. The group I'm talking about is primarily the group that is homeless for a long time, also has co-occurring issues, but there are many people, as I mentioned, that are homeless for a short period of time, and they're the majority. They might fall into a shelter, they might be even on the street for a while, but they go back. The group that captures our attention and most of the services for people who are homeless are focused on is this 20% that remains homeless for months and years. It's the person that's represented in the public mind as homelessness. There's 50% of that population that's homeless is families. We seldom see families on the street. They stay in shelters. The overrepresentation of the solitary figure on the street in the public mind also has consequences for public policy, and that's what we're focusing on. In fact, this initiative that we're talking about in Greeley is exactly focused on this chronic homeless population, and there are good reasons for that. The Housing First program is focused on this group, and there are other types of programs focused for those that just need rent assistance for a few months, for example, so that you would fit the program model to the type of homelessness and type of need, service need that the person has. Here's some background of how we got into this to begin with. And for those of you that remember when there wasn't homelessness in this country began really in the 80s. Early 80s, we, at a national level, stopped investing in the building of public housing. That wasn't a decision that was made under the Reagan administration and has never really been reversed by any administration since that time. We basically have gotten out of the business of building public housing, which is the most affordable housing because it's subsidized. This graph from Dole Beer shows you the fact that through the 70s, late 70s, we were building something like 350,000 units a year nationally of public housing across the country. And then 1981-2, it drops down that kind of like cliff to about 50,000. It's around 2,000 or 3,000 units a year now. So we've gone out of the business, but what that means is, we're missing 350,000 units times 30 years of affordable housing, driving up prices and availability tremendously. That's one large-scale backdrop factor. The other is that deinstitutionalization that began around 65, people with mental illness and discharged to the community, living in substandard housing. That's not the beginning of homelessness. The 60s or 70s was not the beginning of homelessness, it was the 80s. People were living somewhere. Perhaps not great places, but at least off the streets. And then, as the real estate market began to catch fire, those units, the substandard units, were converted. People lost their housing. And what we see, the dark blue line, is the beginning of the incarceration of people who are homeless and mental illness. Today, in the US, the Los Angeles County Jail, Twin Towers and Rikers Island are the two largest asylums for people with mental illness. The homelessness industry that began in the 80s and still most prevalent today takes really three forms. The helping of people, the treatment or incentivizing of people to get better, and the criminalization. The range of services you're all familiar with, from outreach programs to emergency shelters and hostile urban design and transitional housing and permanent housing, all the portfolio of services that we have for people. And they're not exactly random. They are organized in a way that requires people, especially for this group that we're talking about, the people who are chronically homeless, based on the belief that it was their addiction or mental illness that got them homeless, the system as it is designed to help people get better or treat their mental illness and addiction in order to get back into housing. Housing is often used as an incentive in a system like that. There's a belief that people need special kind of housing, supervised housing or group housing. And often you can't go to the next level in the system unless you've complied with the requirements of the earlier steps. Even some of the shelter systems today, many, require sobriety and compliance and meeting curfews in order just to get a shelter bed for the night. So there's this, it's still the predominant system in the country. Culhane wrote an article about the homeless industrial complex recently, and I think he estimated the national investment in shelters at $10.7 billion a year. So that system has been in place and works for many people. 30%, 40%, when you look at it systematically in a randomized trial, that's the kind of data that comes up for that. So many people try and fail to get control of their addiction and mental illness while they're homeless, and they can't. So they go around and around. We have some new desperate measures, involuntary treatment. Mayor Adams in New York is pushing for the involuntary commitment in laws in a much wider way than having clinicians decide who goes to the hospital. Police, family members can petition for involuntary treatment. Governor Newsom in California is introducing bills to have involuntary treatment for people suffering from addiction and homelessness. So the impatience and desperation to move people, whatever it takes, is growing as the numbers are growing. Just as a side note, I have to, in my own work in this area, this is where I started. I started running New York City's involuntary commitment program for 4 years, where we would drive around the city and make sidewalk house calls to people who were homeless and trying to figure out how we could help them, but also with an eye towards figuring out if they were going to be okay for the night. Were they a danger to themselves? Could they survive the winter? Are they well enough that we should leave them alone? If they're coughing up blood, should we take them to the hospital involuntarily? It was a kind of a very intensive and difficult choice to make with most people. The decisions were not easy. What made it easier was that they had medical problems that we thought, well, at least they'll get treatment at the hospital. And we did that for about 350 people a year, every year. And what became apparent as a pattern is that people went to the hospital, got some treatment, but then were returning to the streets. And the whole thing started all over again. And this was the group that just was difficult to kind of, we had to come up with some other approach. It just was not getting us where we wanted to be. The other thing about this particular group was they were doing a cost analysis. The same Dennis Culhane looked at shelter users that were long stayers in the New York City system and found that people who were homeless for a long time and were going in and out of shelter, hospital, jail were costing taxpayers as much, if not more, than people who were housed with support services. So this was not an inconsequential policy or program decision. These things, even though it appears to be that we're doing nothing, were actually quite expensive. And there were some extraordinary individuals that Malcolm Gladwell, for example, wrote about a guy in Reno called $1 Million Murray, and I know there's a gentleman here in Greeley right now who kind of qualifies multiple hospitalizations, Murray was a big drinker on the streets, very charismatic, very friendly, would be arrested sometimes, other times would fall down drunk and gash his head and be at the emergency room. But he was like this for quite some time, and when Gladwell was looking at what Murray's journey had been for 10 years, he based his report on the patrolman's notebook that was the guy who was in Murray's district. So he was friends with Murray, had often taken him to jail himself. And when Gladwell added up the cost of the transports, the emergency rooms, the overnight stays, the treatments, Murray had cost the city of Nevada $1 million over the course of that 10 years, and he was still out there on the street. Not an outlier. An outlier and not an outlier. So what's another approach to this, and what can we do differently? One of the most sort of enlightening looks at big systems data arrived last year, 2022. This book called Homelessness is a Housing Problem, Greg Colburn and Clayton Alton, finally look at data at a national level that addresses the issue of homelessness, mental illness, addiction, and poverty. What causes what? Is there a correlation? And what these scholars did was look at Medicaid data across the country and looked at correlations of mental illness, addiction, poverty with homelessness. Well, when you look at data at macro level, it turns out there's 14 million people that are getting treatment from Medicaid for severe mental illness. 14 million. So we already know only 580,000 are homeless on a particular night. There is no correlation between mental illness, severe mental illness, and homelessness. The vast majority of people who have severe mental illness are living at home or supported by families or in supported housing. The people who have severe addiction, the number is even higher. I think it's 16 or 18 million. So there's no correlation between homelessness and mental illness at this mega level. Also with poverty, lots of people who have very low income and are considered living in poverty, but they're not homeless, living with relatives, doubled up, and so on. So is there anything that predicts homelessness? The one thing that predicts homelessness significantly, nationally, is the price of rent and the rent burden it is for the person's salary. So when you revisit that map of like the distribution of homelessness, the rent from Seattle to San Diego and from Massachusetts to Florida is much higher than it is in the middle of the country. It's much easier in the middle to get a Section 8 voucher and find an apartment, but the Section 8 voucher won't get you to the market value that you need in these other cities. The most prosperous cities have the greatest number of people who are homeless. Prosperity brings new development, new buildings, office towers, taking down old housing, affordable housing, not replacing it, and there's just homelessness is a direct byproduct of prosperity. So as this city or your cities are becoming more prosperous, you are likely to see more people on the street unless you anticipate and do something about it. This is just I was looking at some Colorado data. The slide on the left is the housing, the price of housing over the last 10, 20 years. And the one with the graph, the wavy graph, is the price of rents in Colorado. And Colorado is above average from the US means. Denver, Aurora, the highest. So if you have all of these forces that are contributing to homelessness, taking away of affordable housing, Well, people who have a mental illness and are living on SSI, somewhere between $700 and $900 a month that they're getting, if they lose their housing, and everyone loses housing because of some crisis, it's not the long-term illness or the long-term addiction, it's the loss of a job, or the person that was taking care of them moved away, or they were hospitalized, the landlord closed up the unit, there's a crisis, people fall out of housing into homelessness, and those that can't get back in are the ones who are disabled. And so it appears that the disabled became homeless because of their disability. No, the disabled became homeless from a crisis like everybody else, but because of their disabilities, can't get back in. So we have people, the metaphor I'm using is this idea of homelessness as a flood on your first floor of your house. And we have focused on homelessness that way. Oh my God, the person's homeless, they're mentally ill, you have to do something. Outreach, transitional, emergency, and we're moving everything around. But all we're doing is taking care of the flood on the first floor. You know, the pipe that has burst in the ceiling that's contributing to the falling in of homelessness is seldom addressed. So we're either giving people, mops or meals or clothes or shelter for the night, but they're staying in the same flood zone. I would say the Housing First program, or any program that offers an exit out of the flood, is an exit out of the first floor. But as you exit people, more people are going to fall in unless we fix the leaks in the system that continue to contribute to homelessness. And that's the prevention side. And we don't talk enough about that, but I just want to put it out there as the solution to homelessness. Even if we took everybody off the streets today, we would have more people next year. So what is Housing First, and how is it a different approach? Well, I guess the first myth I want to dispel about Housing First is that it's not really about the housing. Housing First really started in a drop-in center in New York City after we had finished bringing people to Bellevue, and we've got to do something different. We introduced this approach called psychiatric rehabilitation to our treatment teams. Psych rehab was around, Bill Anthony, Boston University, very practical. Psychiatric rehabilitation was much like physical rehabilitation. It wasn't based on diagnosis, it was based on functionality, so that if people, for example, had a broken leg, you don't go and put everybody in a cast because they have a broken leg. You figure out what level of disability the broken leg requires. For some, it's a cane. For some, it's a bandage. For others, it is a cast. For others, it could be an entire replacement surgery. So you titrate the level of support to what the person needs in psych rehab. And the other thing you do is the person who is the recipient of the services is actually in charge of the decisions about how you proceed. It's a person-centered or conservative, there's many different terms for this, but essentially it's a huge power shift from the clinician to the client, and the client guides the treatment or the direction of services. That's huge, especially when the client is somebody on the streets that looks like they don't really, they can barely take care of themselves. But that was the shift we had to make. The change that resulted in great outcomes for people was not us changing them. It was us changing ourselves in order to be able to help them more effectively. And what I'm saying will become clear in a minute. When you hear from the team here, you'll hear stories about how people that have been homeless in Greeley for years are now housed. Same people that were here, different approach, different outcome. So that's the first thing about Housing First. It's not about changing people, It's about changing systems so people with complex issues can be accommodated effectively, caringly. What it's best known for, though, is housing first. So it's catchy and everybody gets that. It's very quick. Oh yeah, you take people and you bring them into housing. Yes, but not because we thought it was a good idea and we're doing it. It's because they thought it was a good idea, and that's why we're doing it. And that's important because that approach doesn't end when people are in housing. That's the approach that drives the entire program after housing, which is actually the harder part. I think that, I think I covered the requirements a little later. It has a number of principles that guide the provision of the support services. Consumer choice, housing is offered as a matter of like housing rather than as a program. So people sign a lease and they have to abide by the rules and conditions of a standard lease like everybody else. This is the one that people don't really understand a lot about and don't often even get right, even when operating these programs. The service support for someone that goes into a housing first place, an apartment of their own, usually that's their first choice. Most people live in apartments in the community and have their own lease. That's sort of the standard housing first program. Although if someone wanted something else, we would get them something else. If they wanted to live with their family or they wanted a particular group setting, we would take them there. But most people want a place of their own. What people don't get is that the service support that follows the placement has to be as intensive as the needs of the person we've just housed. We have to provide the follow-up services to match the needs of the person that's housed for as long as they need them. And the services are of a particular philosophical approach. They're recovery-oriented and they are aiming towards having the person exit the program and have a life in the community. When we say people have a choice in housing and services, that's a practical choice. It's not choice everywhere. There are parts of Greeley, I was looking at the rent maps, where we know we can rent places and other parts we can't, and that doesn't change for anybody else in the program. It's very much like, you have a certain budget, you shop for a certain size or type of apartment in certain neighborhoods. We're just driven by that. There are 2 program requirements in housing first that are not negotiable. One I already mentioned, which is the signing of a standard lease and the expectation that the person will live up to the terms and conditions of the lease and any other agreements that are taking place in the building among every other tenant. But essentially, they have the same rights and the same obligations as any other tenant in that building. That's the expectation. The second, they pay 30% of their income towards the rent. It's sort of standard. The other expectation is that they agree to a home visit by the support services team. This is not housing only. This is a program. And the way in the program is through that social service team, the intensive case management team or ACT team, interdisciplinary team. You can staff the team any number of ways, but that's the entrance to the program. And that team will be visiting people after they're housed, especially immediately after they're housed. They'll visit them frequently. And this is where I think some of the definitional issues have become problematic, because lots of programs that have sort of adopted housing first in name only are offering housing without the support services. And things don't work out well. Things don't work out well. And then people are saying, well, we tried this housing first and it doesn't work here. There are countless examples of places that have rented or bought or set up a 20-unit apartment building, put all of the people that have been chronically homeless in that community in that apartment building, no property management support, one case manager part-time helping, and the building turns out to be really in disarray, chaotic, police calls, disaster. And it's closed down. That's Housing First. We tried it. It didn't work here. That's not Housing First. It's not even close. So this false narrative about it's not working, well, what they're labeling as not working is not the program that the evidence is based on. There is an art to the program, because even though the person agrees to the home visit, it's really the responsibility of the team to make the home visit possible. So that you have to be skilled enough to make a relationship with the person so that they would want to see you. That responsibility is on the team that's providing the services. And that's the only way the program works. And that doesn't begin with the housing, by the way. That would begin when you're doing the outreach or when you're meeting the person wherever they are when they're referred to you. So that obligation of providing the support services is on the team, which requires empathy, creativity, persistence. You have to create a relationship with the person so that when you're knocking on the door, they feel happy to see you. And when things go awry and there's difficulty and the person doesn't want to see you, it's not an option to stop trying. You have to keep going, insisting, demanding. It's rare, but we've had to sometimes hospitalize people out of their apartments because they become too withdrawn or paranoid. We couldn't get in. We didn't know if they were well. So it's not an option not to see people. That housing is separate from services means that if someone has rented an apartment in the community and they're not doing well and they are hospitalized and that apartment, or they're incarcerated, that apartment might be let go, but when the person is released from hospital or jail, the team can continue to help them find the next place when they're released or discharged. So that the services are portable to the person and the units are exchangeable, if you will. In addition to providing the services that match people's needs, the services, quote unquote, are not the traditional mental health and addiction services. They could be any number of things, from grocery shopping to a walk in the park, or going to the benefits office, helping get a new driver's license, joining a library, any number of things that make life interesting for people. And that decision about what the priority is or what the interest is of course driven by the person themselves. So it's a challenge to run it under a Medicaid billing model that only pays for certain kind of treatment services. But if you're going to be successful and provide the kinds of support people need so that they succeed in staying housed and join the community, we have to expand that definition of what service is and what is helpful. The way we've studied this, because it was kind of controversial, we were able to do randomized control trials in a number of different cities and a number of different countries. And what that means is that we had a pool of people that were homeless, had been diagnosed with severe mental illness. As a minimum, 80 or 90% had also co-occurring addiction issues. And from that pool, we randomly assigned people to the traditional staircase model, treatment, transitional housing, and then housing eventually, and the housing first model. And then we followed them in some studies 2 years, some studies 3 years, one study in Toronto 6 years. The results were like this. about 80%, and it ranged really from 80 to 90, of the people going into Housing First programs got into housing much more quickly and stayed stably housed, compared to the stairway group, which in this particular study I'm showing you, in 36 months, about 40% of the stairway group had reached permanent housing. So it gets people into housing quickly, people stay stably housed, and basically ends homelessness. The results are not as dramatic for, it doesn't cure mental illness immediately, it doesn't cure obesity, diabetes, or addiction. You're working on those things. And there are positive improvements on the quality of life, as you would imagine, almost immediately after being housed. These kind of results have been replicated in 26 randomized controlled trials. This is probably one of the most studied interventions that we have. And the better the program fidelity, the more consistent people are in implementing the program in the way I've just described it, the better the results. Greater stability, higher quality of life. So that's why it's important to sort of, when we talk about Housing First, talk about it in a way that is the actual model, and so that we can build on that evidence and design programs that will effectively get us to where we want to go. The work that's going on here in Greeley is very promising in not only the program that they have put into place, but in the citywide approach that having multiple partners working in the same direction can achieve the goal of ending street homelessness. I'll just tell you one example. The city of Milwaukee recently announced that they had, on their last 2022 count, 17 people on the streets. It's a much bigger city, 600,000 people. They started off with several hundred chronically homeless people, I think it was 300 and change. And they took a Housing First approach, initially a program, just like you're doing here, and then they brought in the business. They had metrics. They were going to hit targets every year in terms of their reduction. They brought in the business community, brought in the provider community to refer. They brought people that were working in the Parks Department to make referrals to the Housing First team. United Way contributed to the cost associated with housing acquisition and landlord incentives and indemnification. They had the district attorney involved in the housing application process, so that if somebody had a crime associated with homelessness, it would be expunged so that the person can get the voucher. Judges followed in. So you can see it's a community effort to kind of all focus and work in the same direction to get people identified, referred, and into housing, and then the support services that come with it. And that's how they got into 17 in the last count and going down. Okay. So, take some questions, yeah.
Yeah, and if you guys can help, if folks have questions, we'll just run up to you and give you the mic. Stand. And oh, here you go. Sorry, Stan. And Mark's got the other one. Perfect. Okay. So, there we go.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. My question is,
Oops.
how do police departments respond?
How
I
do
haven't
police-
heard you mention police in any of your talk today.
Right.
If I can interject something real quick with that great question.
I'm sorry?
If I can interject something real quick with that great question. How can we get this relationship to end it? We depend on the law enforcement to take care of our homelessness. We need to end that stigma
Right.
of allowing the law enforcement to take care of homeless issues. That's not their purpose.
So I heard two questions. How are police involved? I think it's kind of different. And then the other gentleman made the comment, how do we keep it from being the police being the main, and right now, because of lack of outreach and
Absolutely.
things like that, our police are the ones that have the most contact, which is certainly not the job they signed up for. So,
Yeah. Well, I mean, in this collaborative approach, I mean, you would want to have the police involved as a source of referral, not as a source of arrest. And I think that's got to be negotiated at the city level, you know, that this is what we're doing now, we're not bringing people to jail. Unless it's the kind of crime that people have to be arrested. You know, there's lots of crimes that are, you know, public intoxication, trespass, you know, like all these crimes that are associated to being on the street. No citations, you know, referral to homeless services, I think is one way to bring people in. And the other way, and that's beyond the police and the criminal justice system, there's lots of people that have been arrested and are in jail and after time served are released back to homelessness. That would be another opportunity for law enforcement writ large to contribute to ending homelessness by referring to the program rather than discharging to the street.
So you spoke about expanding the definition of services, and I was wondering about access to transportation and how that fits into the piece of providing stability for people, and if that's been something that's been offered as a service.
It's a huge issue, you know, especially in rural areas, and you know, as is, you know, internet access, and you know, there's each community has to figure out, I think, what is essential. If someone can't get to an appointment, is telehealth possible? You know, if you need transportation, because you won't be able to shop for groceries unless you have transportation. I would say the team has to provide the transportation. I mean, right here in Greeley, they have a relatively small team. They have 5 vehicles to accommodate exactly this demand, because not much of a bus service, and you can't get around easily, and people need to have appointments, and so yes, absolutely, transportation is an issue. Go ahead.
Hi, thanks for being here. I have a question just in regards to the vouchers. And so I've had other people talk to me about this, and I'm just wondering, like, how do we prevent landlords from being slumlords? I have one other question too, but I think people are worried about maybe that money going into the community to certain landlords. Is there any check or incentive to make sure that they're providing proper housing?
well, so the vouchers, before it's approved, the apartment has to pass an HQS inspection, housing quality standards that's set by HUD. That's not super high, but it is one sort of check and balance. Before here, I was in Tulsa, and what they started was a Gold Star landlord program for landlords that were, you know, very invested. You would never think of calling them a slumlord, and that they were willing to rent to people in Section 8, and they ended up giving preference and more advertising and things like that. That's how the city sort of incentivized that. Prevent?
Yeah. You know, landlords absolutely have to be held accountable, and the HQS is one way, but one of the things that also happens with these Housing First programs is that you've housed a tenant in a building and you have case managers visiting that building frequently. It actually, then the case manager might notice things going on in the building that need to be addressed, and it kind of empowers the tenant, and you have an extra set of eyes and support there for the tenant to make sure that the housing stays of the quality that the voucher is paying for.
And I'm just going to interject one more thing, if you don't mind. I mean, it is super important. Everyone, we want decent, safe, affordable housing. And we also, it's about building our relationship with our landlords, with that property manager. You know, once we have that connection and relationship, it just works so much better, and that only happens when they call Veronica or Joe and say, hey, this thing is happening, and it's after hours, and we're responsive, and start to build that trust.
Right. It's a huge issue, the landlord issue, because I mean, without landlords, you know, in this program model, there's no program. Like they're like, you know, there's the case manager, there's the client, and there's the landlord. It's cute. And I think programs, you know, like this one are also taking into account that it might not go well with some tenants, that there might be damage to the apartment. You want to indemnify the landlord. If that damage is caused by the tenant, you want to negotiate a relocation out of that unit if it's not going well, rather than have the landlord go to landlord-tenant court. I mean, the management of the landlords is a hugely important part of the program.
My next question is and I'll leave it to you. It's more of like a theoretical. So people have asked me, like, why not shelter first instead of, or shelter first and housing earned? I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
I would go haircuts first. I would go, you know, train rides first. I would go with whatever the person said they wanted first. Most people want a place of their own, and that's how we got to housing first. And why it works is because you don't have like a push. You know, you don't have to like incentivize the person or coerce them or threaten them in order to move. It's like the whole program runs with the client asking you for help, and they're leading the way. So that whole battle for motivation, you know, there's all this mythology. Oh, the person's not ready for housing. Oh, this person is treatment resistant. Well, they might not be ready for a shelter bed. They don't want to go to a shelter bed, you know, by 5 o'clock and show up sober and, you know, and get out at 6 in the morning. They'd rather just stay where they are. That's not saying that they don't want housing. You know, it's just saying that they don't want shelter, you know, or they don't want to go to treatment. They've been to treatment 12 times and discharged back to the same spot. How about housing? Oh, suddenly that person is highly motivated to go and fill out things and see units. Same person, different approach.
And Sam, his second part was about housing earned. So, like, a lot of people say that, right? Like, so we're providing these vouchers to folks, and what have they done to earn it? How do you respond to that?
How do I respond to that?
Well, here's the deal. Like, I think I might know how you respond, but it's a question that people ask.
Well, what would you suggest that we do? You know what I mean? It's like, you want to leave them there? You know, it's like, that's not cheaper. You want to take them to jail? You want to take, you know, I mean, what is the smartest thing you can do, and that's most effective in helping, you know, this person get better, and you feel good about your community? You know, it's just kind of a win-win. You know, it's cost saving, it's great outcomes, and it changes the whole nature of where we live.
I agree.
Not used to you attacking me.
Yes, I have a lot of questions, but I'll cut it down to 2. First of all, I want to dovetail off the lady that talked about transportation. Here in Weld County and Greeley, it is really bad. And down the west side of Interstate 25, it's a lot better. But anyway, my second one is there's a lot of barriers to housing and even getting a job, and also too, it's to you know, to be able to have you know, if it's raining out or something like that, and then if you like go in a restaurant before, until it quits raining or snowing or whatever, that a lot of these restaurants now, you got to buy something, and let's say that you don't get paid. If it's Social Security, you have a part-time job, full-time job, and that's the third question is that it's mind-boggling that people that have full-time jobs, even assistant manager, or managers of a big country, and, a big business, and yet are homeless. Now, how do you, it's mind-boggling, and how do you have answer for that?
Yeah, well, you know, that third one about people who have full-time jobs and are still homeless, that one I think is so little, paid little attention to. You know, that, because there's all this mythology about people who are homeless are not working hard enough, or they're lazy, or they're not motivated, and there are many people in the shelter that are working full-time, and because it's minimum wage, they can never make enough to both feed themselves and their families and put together the money needed for the security deposit and the first month's rent, and they're staying in the shelters. I didn't fully understand your restaurant question.
Well,
Juliana, did you want to comment on that?
Well, I would say, and Steve, you correct me, that Steve has been an incredible advocate, and I think part of it, as you were saying it, Steve, I was like, I think this isn't a question, this is a job interview to go work with Sam as he does these trainings, but tell me what I might have missed.
Yeah, what I'm saying is, let's say that you go to a business like a fast food, and just to be able to rest or
Right.
Or that, and yet you got a week to get paid, so you're trying to balance it out, and then they kick you out because you don't buy something,
Right.
and you're not bothering anybody or anything like that. Plus, some of the businesses now are locking their bathrooms.
Yeah.
And if you go in as a customer and you or your child needs to go, and then all of a sudden, and they're real busy, and there might be some embarrassment there. And
Yeah.
that's another problem. That's what I meant.
Yeah, it's an observation I noticed myself at Starbucks. I buy the coffee, I'm out of the Starbucks, and I want to go to the bathroom, and I can't because I'm not a customer anymore because I drank the coffee. No, it's hostile. You know, when I was talking about hostile urban design, like people, some cities have like put like an extra metal railing on benches so people can't lie down. They put like steel spikes along cement blocks where people could sit and rest so that no one stays there. It's like a purposefully designed to keep people away. It's cultural, and it doesn't have to be that way. I mean, you could, we make the culture.
We have a question up front.
I also have a two-part question. We're working on legislation this next session to have some sort of diversion for people that get caught up in the criminal justice system, to keep them from incarceration and maybe whether it be involuntarily or voluntarily committed to plans like this, where it's the housing first options, obviously with the treatment incentives in there. With that, I come from a law enforcement background, so knowing that people aren't being arrested for being homeless, people are being arrested for and detained for crimes they're committing based on mental health, mental illness, and co-occurring addiction issues for the most part. Are there things that are going to be put in place? Well, first of all, I guess first question is, would this incorporate people that are, if that kind of legislation was introduced to Colorado, that people were diverted to a housing first program, say, if it was here in Greeley? And beyond that, I was in South Dakota, saw a great model that they were doing locally there in one of their counties that had the housing. It was obviously, in this case, was government employed, but they had the housing, but they had to have skin in the game. They were offered an option of transportation to and from a job if they needed it, but otherwise they had to be there. They had to be there for their treatment. Of course, you might have little relapses here and there, but people still had to maintain their treatment. They had to maintain their housing ability, if they could pay whatever they could pay in rent based on what employment they had. Is there going to be skin in the game for people to kind of teach them the life skills of budgeting and things like that to be able to get back on track where they need to be so they don't repeat those lifestyles?
Right. Absolutely a possible and useful partnership. I think that the diversion into a housing first program, meaning low barrier and subsidies there and the case management support, works very well. There's a tension between the probation officer or parole officer and the case manager, because one is like client-driven and the other is much more kind of rule-bound, and the person has to meet the terms of their probation in order to stay out of jail. But they're completely workable in terms of that kind of partnership. As you've seen, there are other programs like the one you described.
In terms of the skin in the game, I'm sorry, Sam, were you about to talk about that?
No, go ahead.
Well, what I was going to say, my experience I used to do direct service, was that most people, once they're in housing, the vast majority, because in some ways that's the assumption that we're going to, like, they won't want to do X, Y, or Z if we're not, like, saying that's a requirement. My experience has been, as soon as people, like, get into housing, even as they start thinking about it, the two things I've heard the most over 20 years is, first goal is to reconnect with family, and the second is to get a job. Doing something, like, to get reconnected, to be part of. And I would say that, and again, it's not everyone, and because of that lease, right? I mean, that's, people have to abide by that. And if the first apartment doesn't work out, we are committed to the person, and we work with them on rehousing, but we also have a lot better understanding of them and their needs and us, and sort of, we talk to them like, what do you need to do differently? What do we need to do differently? Did we not provide enough support? Did we not offer enough treatment? So that's my understanding and framework for it.
I have an operational thought about it, which is, however you propose this program, I think referrals don't work. So that if you're going to have a diversion program, it's got to be right there in the court, and the people providing the program have to be present so that the introduction is made almost immediately.
I have a question.
I can go. Oh, there you are.
Well, someone in the back there has had their hand up for a long time. See this person right there?
Oh, yeah. We'll be right back to you.
Thanks for waiting.
No worries. I actually also have two different questions, but they're completely separate. So one is actually going to be directed to the representatives from the city of Greeley. This question is based on me working at the Housing Navigation Center and working really closely with a lot of the clients. And that is, what education and training are the case managers from City of Greeley getting in regards to tenant landlord laws, rights, and things like that, and how is that education being kind of trickled down to the client so that they can understand what their rights are as a tenant? Because a lot of them, it's the very first time that they are in an independent living situation.
Yeah. Joanna, will you grab a mic from someone? Joanna, which most of you probably know, she's been in the community for 20 years, out doing this work, amazing, is the Homeless Solutions Manager.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think this team is a new team, started in April, so the learning curve is steep on a lot of different aspects, especially tenant rights and the requirements for their housing, their leases. So the voucher authority for us is North Range. Sherry's sitting here, and they do all the lease education, and our team is there with them. Our team is there when they sign their lease. They meet the property managers, and so that understanding is together. And then how we go back back into the house as their house and work on that and talk about those and talk about, you know, there's no tobacco smoking in this. How do we do that? And so we have one gentleman that is now on the quit line, right? Because of looking at some of those lease requirements. So it's a partnership amongst the property managers, the landowners, our team, but most of all, the members that are the people that we serve. And so that's the basic education. Plus a lot of reading and understanding that goes along with that.
And Joe, we also have Sonia, our housing specialist.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was on my brain, so thank you for reading it.
You're welcome.
Yeah, we have a housing specialist, which, and after doing this for a lot of years, man, what a gift a housing specialist is who understands the language. I'm a nurse by background. I mean, she has understanding from being on the property management side that she brings to the table, and she provides ongoing support, education, plus she's in on all those lease agreements and visits our people monthly or as often as they need, and looks in the homes with them, and they figure things out. Yeah.
I think we had a second question from our,
There's a person here in the middle.
well, she said she had 2 questions at the start.
Okay, sorry. And I actually have an additional resource for you.
Okay.
Am I still going? Or?
Yeah.
Okay. My second question actually comes from my experience as a homeless individual, and that I used to live in a transitional housing program that saved 30% of our income, and then at the end of the 18 months, it was given back to us a month later, you know, after, you know, making sure there's no damages to the units that we were in and things like that. Is that anything that you guys would ever consider? Because it definitely gave me a head start on transitioning into full independence, and I actually got to have to get used to budgeting and everything like that, with having to give my 30% over every single month, making sure that I had my documentation correctly. Sometimes they would intentionally trip me up and be like, oh, you didn't turn in your rent. I'd be like, oh, here's my receipt, you know? And so, you know, that was really helpful to me. Is that something that you guys would ever consider in the future?
So I mean, absolutely. We need, just like it's all of this individual service, that's why, and that's what our city manager said, it's not the, you know, one size fits all. We have those transitional programs here, and I know that, like, we don't have enough of anything. A lot of times we've been talking about duplication of services, you hear that. I would say from the people I've been working with in terms of our community partners, the concern at this moment is not duplication of services, but coordination, right? And again, just like Sam said, if the person says that that's what they want, and certainly we offer, because a lot of times it takes a while to get an apartment. Would you like to try this? So, 100%. So we had one more question here, then we're gonna take a break. There's some beautiful pastries that I really hope you enjoy, and then also come back. So, right here, Mark.
Oh, there's a person right here.
Oh, gosh, we got so many.
This guy. You know, we'll have questions at the other end also, like when we come back from the break, we'll have time.
Yeah.
I mean, this is kind of an uncomfortable question to ask, but
Oh, give the mic to that guy then.
the person you're trying to help, are there consequences to them, you know, consistently breaking rules, like 3 strikes and you're out kind of a thing, where, you know, they don't seem to be, I'm not going to list the possible scenarios, but as you can imagine, would there be consequences to an individual, you know, not towing the line?
So, not only can I imagine that, but I have lived through it many times. And I have have to say that that's one of the most difficult questions to have an answer to. Because we always think about consequences like, how's that person paying for it? Or like somehow, what are we going to extract for their repeated failures? And where I end up with this is the person that is having trouble is the one who's suffering the most. You know, people have gone into an apartment and then they've furnished like joyous, everything is wonderful. Their friends knock on their door, they can't say no, their friends have saved their lives on the street, shared their food with them. How they're not going to let them sleep on the couch. And then person's not leaving, and it gets complicated, and the person loses their apartment. That's one strike, right? They've lost the apartment. Who feels the worst in all of that scenario is the person who's lost the apartment. Shame, like they feel like they've squandered that chance, or just the hopelessness of it. It's almost like if you don't let go, like almost an instinctive need to punish because you've worked so hard to get them to where they are, and put all of your own investment aside and stay empathically connected to trying to help this person recover from that terrible event that they went through. I mean, and sometimes you have to go through it again too. And then, I don't know that would be any different for our family members, you know? Like, how many chances does your son or daughter deserve, or your brother? I don't know the answer to that, but I just know that to have a chance at helping, you have to stay empathically connected. Okay, let's take a
So
break.
we're going to take our break, and then 15 minutes, and then come back, and we're going to keep rolling. Okay. So thank you all, and I'm so happy to see that so many came back. I mean, I know it's a lot, it's a commitment, this amount of time, so thank you. Also, one of the things our city manager, Raymond, meant to say was that the mayor apologizes for not being able to be here because he went to the police commander's funeral and he was also speaking at that. So otherwise, he absolutely would have been here. What we're going to do now is we are going to have a couple case conferences, and Sam's going to ask questions, and Ross is going to throw it out to you all. And to start off, though, Joanna is going to give you just a few pieces of information about our team, sort of what's happened since we started. And essentially, the team really got up and running, I think, kind of the end of April, because we hired and then training and different things like that. So, okay, take it away.
All right. Thanks, Juliana. This is exciting to be here and talk about where the team is at this point. We have hired 5 case managers, and Juliana had said that the case ratio is about a 12-to-1. And we also have a peer specialist and then the housing specialist that I talked about. So I know not everybody's in the room, but if you are and you're wearing our Housing Foundation shirt, would you just stand up and wave to people so they know you're here? Yes. Juliana's covered a lot of the program of Housing First, so I'm not going to repeat any of that, but you know, from doing this, Juliana has said I've been doing this for a long time, this type of work, but the exciting thing for someone who's been in the trenches is when you lead with housing and you can take care of them in a house or off the streets, it makes a difference. And yeah, I had too many people die when I was doing that work, and so I'm very passionate about that, and have a team that is just as passionate about it. So we have those 60 individuals. Right now we have 55 since April that we have actively in the process of providing case management, and that includes, we had to find them, outreach them, start building trust, engagement, and talking about what is housing first, and letting them know, once you're housed, you're not done with us, you know? And so really like doing that kind of process, which they look at us with this kind of like, you're what? You know, and that we do go back. And in fact, our one case manager, I love telling this, she is so passionate about finding people and persistent. We were trying to find someone on a skateboard with orange hair. She was zipping around this town like crazy. And you know what? She found him and has engaged him and is doing well. But it goes on, and the real work, I don't know if Dr. Sam said it or Juliana, the work begins truly when we get them housed, but it's been even difficult getting the voucher process. So, but I need to say before I talk about a few facts is it's been talked about not duplicating, and the key truly is good coordination, and that's, we all need to do better. Communicate and plan and help individuals and connect that way. So we wouldn't have been with the data that I'm going to give you if we didn't have those community partners that helped us. And somebody had asked about the police. The police, the neighborhood action team has been so helpful in helping us find and connect with people. So I wanted to for sure mention that. And they go out as we do outreach. So, and we partner. Kind of how we approach things is different, but it's a good little partnership. United Way, Greeley Fire Department, Squad 1, NCHA have, you know, and so many more. North Range has just been incredible partners. So I said 55 people we're active with either completed those vouchers, and if any of you have not done a voucher packet, you need to participate once, because it's not easy. It's finding and helping people find identifications, and that is extremely sometimes challenging, so because you have to have that as part of the packet. And then the other thing before I give a few things, and Juliana talked a little bit about this, but we are partnering with the University of Northern Colorado's research department and doing a 2-year cost-benefit analysis of, does the Housing First model deliver on kind of some cost reductions? So looking at those things. So wanted to make sure I mentioned that. Today, as I walked in this door, we have housed 22 people. And think about that, since the middle to end of April. That means they had to get voucher ready and search, and so 22. 5 are approved, and we're just in the process this week and next week of lease signing and doing all of that work.
Approved it by like the apartment where they want to?
Yes, yes,
okay.
Thank you. Yes, so they're approved of the housing. They just need to sign the lease and get ready, and we'll move them in. So we're hoping definitely by hopefully the end of next week, that's 27 people should be housed. So, and a couple other interesting facts that this team has worked with community partners. 10 are in the active process of searching, finding, talking with our folks we serve on what do they want. I see Sonia out there nodding her head. She's right there, you know, helping them find apartments that meet their needs and showing them. And so of those housed that I just talked about, 7 are women, ages 35 to 65, 15 are men, 29 to 73, and get this, total years of homelessness, 110 years, the average of over 5 years, so of those that we're actively managing. And I always like to give this factor because I hear this all the time. The average length of time living in Greeley is 31 years. And I like to say that because from being in this community, the number one thing we hear, we're helping all these other people from other communities and we need to help our own. Well, we're helping our own, 31 years living in Greeley for that group. So with that, I am going to proudly have Veronica Silas and Joe. I'm just going to tell, Veronica came from the coordinated entry system, so she had that kind of knowledge. And Joe Martinez came from the sheriff's department and wanted to serve people in a different way. So just a little introduction, and I'll turn it over.
Hi everyone, I'm going to be presenting one of the community members we've been working on. I'm going to share a bit about his history, his demographics, what we've been doing, and what we will be doing in the future with them as well.
Veronica, just to be super clear, we did ask this person's permission that they would be okay with this.
Yes, we did. This person did consent for this information and their story to be shared with the community.
Thank you.
So the first person we'll be presenting is a chronically homeless man. He's 87 years old and he was born and raised here in Colorado. He's been in Greeley in northern Colorado for many, many years. We know for at least 10. This person completed high school and then went on to play minor league baseball in his early 20s. He held a variety of other jobs throughout his life and presents with a wealth of knowledge about many, many different things. He's deeply involved in the community, having connections with the local service providers, community churches, and businesses. This community member was referred to us by another community partner in May. Previously, he was living in his van and presenting with memory loss, confusion, and the need to hold on to many, many items, specifically food. Since being admitted to the program, we've worked with the client to move into a hotel where he's been staying with. Since then, we've been doing hotel daily check-ins and intensive support by our peer specialists and the case managers. He's been provided with transportation to his appointments and has worked with the hotel staff and the City of Greeley staff on cleaning his van and getting it fixed, as well as maintaining a safe and sanitary living environment. This community member has recently been approved for a studio apartment and is set to move in next week. As he transitions into housing, one of his primary goals is to fix his van, something that he holds very near and dear to his heart. So we will be working with him. We take him to his mechanics frequently so that he can check on it, make sure everything is in order, and then to also maintain his routine of doctor's appointments, lunch, laundry, and church. Our goal as a care team is to continue to look for creative solutions on how to combat the accumulation of items, provide positive integration into the community, and empower the client to lead us as he transitions into stable long-term housing.
So Veronica, do you want to talk about what you're struggling with or the question? Or did you guys plan to read both and then do that? You decide.
It's better to do
Yeah.
I'd say one thing that we've been struggling with this community member is just changing that routine. He's 87 years old. He's had his routine for the past few years, living in his van. He knows the people that he trusts, where he likes to go, and so really just working with him as he leads us and he leads the care that we provide into his new environment, his new stable housing. And maybe transitioning where he does laundry, where he accesses different resources, but also doing it at his pace and his timeline, I'd say is one thing that we are struggling with. And then just also the accumulation of items and recognizing that those are very important to him, and how can we make sure that he stays housed and stays stable and healthy, while also being able to hold on to what he needs to and when he wants to.
This is the person I think that you had mentioned unsure about leaving the motel, is that correct?
Yep,
Okay.
yeah. So it was first, when we presented, he was able to go into a hotel, being unsure about that. He had lived in his van and went back and forth with the cold weather shelter and stuff. So just understanding, like, making sure his van was there was very important when we first moved into the hotel, that he could have eyes on that and see what was going on. And now that moving into housing, due to having his voucher and everything, he's really unsure about that, and so creating a transition process that he is comfortable with is going to be very important, especially this next week as we work on that.
What is he unsure about?
He really likes the community he's formed at the hotel. He really likes seeing the families and the children there, and so making sure we're going to have to really make sure that he is able to access that and introduce him to his neighbors. He likes the area, he's gotten comfortable, he likes the room itself, and just how it's set up, and so those transitions. And he really likes to swim. And so he's enjoying the swimming pool.
Does he have to move?
From our understanding with the voucher, he does, unfortunately. And so when we were doing the apartment searches, he was accepted by many apartments, and so kind of seeing what worked best for where his church was and what he wanted to do. And then also, the place he's moving doesn't have a swimming pool, so what are we going to do about that? And so we've been working with him to, discuss buying a rec pass and making a schedule on when we can make sure that he gets to swimming. And
He's how old?
he's 87.
He's 87 years old.
Yep.
I would say we should start a manual and start asking him, like, how did you get to be 87 and on the street? And just like it's a how to live manual, because this guy, it's amazing that he's 87 and he's like as connected and together. And
He doesn't even need glasses.
He needs glasses.
He doesn't.
Doesn't even need glasses. I want to know what he eats.
Squad 1 has helped with his medical needs too. That has been really important to keep him in the housing that we have for those needs.
Yeah, definitely. As he's transitioned it from the van to the hotel, utilizing all of our community partners, Squad 1 especially has been really helpful because he's 87 and he has some health problems that he doesn't always have like the understanding of, and so they've been really instrumental by being able to meet him where he is and assist him with all of that. And then I would also say the navigation center has been instrumental as well. Without them just being there and then also opening their arms to him, it would be an incredibly hard transition.
You know what I want to underline, what I hear like that is exciting for me, not only the success of the story, but you say you visit him every day, you visit, a peer visits. I mean, the level of connection with this man and the support that he's getting is just what we're talking about. Like, what does it take to make the thing successful? And it's so commendable that you're able to see him like that.
And on top of, like, when we know
And
we've
then
had,
all the other teams also working with him.
definitely, when we know he's had a tough week or had a fall early in the week, our on-call person checks on him on the weekends and makes sure that everything is okay, his managers are where they need to be. And so.
Beautiful, yeah. Any questions or comments from anybody here?
Great job.
The one thing, I did not mention is we talk about the transition into housing that we have in place is a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week, every day of the month, every day of the year, on-call person that's not only available to the people we serve, but to our land owners, our property managers, and we're working with them so that they have the support needed as we move. Like this gentleman, when he first moved into the hotel, he wandered everywhere and, kind of we had to navigate and help the hotel people kind of know how to work with him and accept who he was. So we're hoping that's a big part of how we support our property managers, so they know how and can call us to help when they see issues or concerns. So I did want to mention that.
That's important.
Couple questions and comments.
The question I was hoping to ask when the room was a little fuller, but I'll ask it now to Dr. Tsemberis. I'm a business owner, building owner, and physician and active community member in Greeley. And what is my daily, almost daily frustration with my downtown building is intentional loitering, public intoxication of homeless that have a voucher, that choose to follow their routine and be homeless and be intoxicated and be indecent in front of my business. And it's an issue a little bit with the city for the alleyway, and I would like to have a no loitering sign in the alley that the city could enforce. But also, as a representative of the downtown business group, we're really struggling to have business downtown, to have people come downtown, to feel safe downtown. And so I think the sweetness you offer and the care coordination would be very welcome in our current non-housed or intentionally choosing to not use their voucher homeless community, because it is so difficult to be a business owner and deal with it every single day when it affects my bottom line. And any advice that you would have, Dr. Tsemberis, to business owners and maybe to the city to support this?
She asked you, Sam. I mean, what I can say is...
I have, you want to say
I'll
something?
say one thing and then...
Okay. We've been talking about this, because I think that we're not going to solve this, by having a team that's not talking to the business. We need to talk to each other, so your information, you're calling into the team, and the team coming out to meet people and engage them. I mean, that's what this is about.
So, do you have advice for the team currently to help engage the business owners?
That's for you.
Oh, okay, sure. I mean, I think our advice for our team, certainly, like our neighborhood action team has done, they go around, and our team has gone many times around downtown. I think the best thing, especially, let's talk specifically about this person who has the voucher, is I want you to get Joanna's number when we leave here, and of course, they will come out, engage that person. I mean, so we have 60 vouchers. We have 55 people already identified and that we're working with. So, and we have saved 2 for people who are coming from the hospitals. Like, so the ERs know that, like, this person, we see them over and over and over again, and the ER is really for their housing, but that's not appropriate. But that doesn't mean we won't try and figure out something to help this person. If you say the person already has a voucher, then that's good, right? So we don't need to use one of our vouchers. But just like Sam said, we also must have services. It sounds like this person has some significant needs. Like if they don't have someone working with them on a regular basis, that it's not going to be so helpful just to provide housing.
The other thing that happens in other communities with the downtown improvement district organizations, I don't know if you're self-taxing or if you have like a fee structure, but other bids have hired their own outreach worker for the geographic neighborhood of the bid. So there's a kind of an ongoing support, outreach, referral to this team, kind of your own component of addressing homelessness within the bid. Very, very effective, and then coordinating with everybody else.
Yeah. And I do think, obviously there's not an outreach team right now. That's one of the things I said at the beginning, but it's also one of the goals. And our goal is to have that established within 6 months. So.
May I interject on that?
Sure.
Because I think that I watched your webinar where you talked with people from Milwaukee, and their success. And I remember, as I recall, that the Downtown Development Authority decided to have outreach people rather than security guards.
Yes.
Yeah, so then when you're doing outreach, when they're walking around, it's not for securing, it is for securing, but it's also for doing outreach to people that are experiencing homelessness. And that's part of what helped Milwaukee to connect people to the service structure.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it's not my question, but I'd love to hear anything else. Well, maybe it is a question, but I know you're a catalyst. I believe you're a catalyst for the success in Milwaukee, because as I recall from that webinar, they had you come in and do like this you're doing here with Greeley to help them kind of get things going in Milwaukee.
Right.
Is that the case?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said at the very beginning, it's not like I went to Milwaukee, I was summoned. So people, the county executive wanted to do something about homelessness in Milwaukee City and charged the guy who was the head of the housing authority, says, you know, this is homelessness, what can we do? So they Google, you know, what do you do about chronic homelessness? And that's how they reached out to me. But the community was already ready to do something, like this community. Like there, you know, like there's a readiness here, and you can't have one person go to a community and change the mindset. You can guide the direction of the intentionality and the resources and the purpose. All right, Joe.
All right, good afternoon. This community member is a 44-year-old Hispanic male. His education level is unknown. He has work history in construction and at our local packing plant. He has family but does not know their whereabouts. He has a Catholic faith and an interest in soccer, a high interest in soccer. He only speaks Spanish. This community member is chronically homeless and was referred through coordinated entry. This community member was in a car accident about 8 years ago, which caused a traumatic brain injury. Since that time, he struggles with memory issues, anger, and some medical issues. While on the street, he abused alcohol to assist in coping. He is currently at a hotel and in our program. He's benefiting from the program. He has been taking his medication. He is working to establish a daily routine, which has helped his medical issues and also his alcohol abuse. He has received his housing voucher and is working with a property management company this week and next week, hopefully, for his apartment approval. We are presenting this community member today to discuss strategies and next steps in assisting him in his goal of stable, long-term housing.
Do you have particular concerns, Joe, or?
You know, with the brain injury is required a lot of time and effort by the team, and we are assisting his reminders with medication, which are taken both day and evening. Maria, who had to step out, our case manager is his case manager. She's there reminding him to take his medications. We've now layered in Mark, who goes a couple times a week, just to have somebody else be reminding him and work on that progress. But it's just that when he gets by himself and we establish these routines, and that he's able to kind of pick up on it and self-progress too. And so.
Well, that's the question.
Yeah.
I mean, with the brain injury, will he actually be able to establish routines? But it sort of, for me, brings to mind the issue of disability benefits. And if he has a documented brain injury, he might qualify, and I don't know Medicaid or Medicare well enough, maybe someone here does, he may qualify for additional in-home services, because he's someone that sounds like, in terms of your team's capacity to go twice a day, all the time, ongoing for this person, exceeds, you know, your so you need more help. Does someone have any comment on that? I mean, I've seen this with duly diagnosed people.
Oh, we got lots of comments.
My recommendations for services I don't know how old he is, but the thing is, he has a disability, go to agency area on aging, and they could funnel you into some resources there. And also too, that if he gets his disability, area agency on aging could help even more, but they can give you some ideas at the front.
And I do know Maria is actively working on the disabilities.
Yeah, also too, also Adele, even though I have not positive, but they're going to go into brain injury more, even though they with Hope Apartments and people got kicked out because they want to remodel it and they did brain injury. So they
Actually, Adeo is apparently closing.
Oh, they are?
Well, you know what, I'm gonna, because that's we can have a whole other meeting about a day, but we do have a couple experts here with people with brain injuries. Developmental disabilities.
So irregardless if he has waiver eligibility or not, Connections for Independent Living might be a great resource. They have some technology stuff going on there. So something as simple as reminders through technology might be helpful, but they have great counselors that could support with his journey to independence.
And as we understand, portions of ADEO are closing, ADEO is not closing, and they are missioned specifically for brain injury. So it's a resource that should be looked into.
Oh, how about Councilor DeBeauty?
Give a politician a microphone. I am curious about this person having identification and documentation, and if you can talk about the struggle for people who are living on the street, keeping those documentations and how critical it is for their trajectory.
Sure. I know Maria that's been one of the biggest obstacles and barriers for her is to secure this documentation for this individual because he's been chronically homeless and does not have it. And that goes throughout the program. I mean, we talk about getting vital documents, and the Navigation Center, I can't tell you how crucial they are for us in how we started just helping us secure vital documents. And because they don't have them, and they don't have them on them, and I'm generalizing, I want you to know that, but they don't have them on them, and so the Navigation Center does a great thing with helping them get identifications and ensuring that they have a file and that we can go to the file, but we have assisted quite a bit in that. Looks like Joanna is going
I'm not a politician, but give me a mic and I'll take the opportunity. No, I think I'm going to broaden it beyond this case, but this person and several of our others, we're working one that gentleman had the green card, but through this process, they lose it, things are stolen, encampments are moved, whatever that is that happens. But it gets difficult because not only is it difficult to even find how to navigate that, the cost for green card replacement. I think Maria was telling me this morning we needed $450, or I think that's what she said. So it's costly, I think, is where you're moving. We have a lady from Italy. Oh my, that's been a real journey to get that and help her to get going in what she needs. But it's part of the process. It can be lengthy. We're using our partners and resources as we go.
I just want to put it out there. This was announced a couple of days ago in Los Angeles. The mayor, is desperate to do things about homelessness, and they just reached an agreement with HUD, and I think our housing authority person is gone here. Is he still here? No. I want to put it out in the universe because maybe it'll like spread. HUD agreed that in Los Angeles, just on verbal and understanding some minimal documentation, a person can go into the apartment with the voucher and do the documentation after they're housed, because it takes weeks or months. Yeah. I mean,
Okay. So it sounds like the case management is very intensive, and that you would never get to take a day off. So what does that look like? Do you have backup for each other? Or do you tag team people? And is the intention that eventually, a couple of years down the road, you fade out? Or maybe Dr. Sam can speak more to long-term case management and services? Thank you.
Yeah, so the team, I call them the point person for who they are providing services for, but they're getting so good at sharing and mixing and working together to cover the needs. Because what we know with this, the people we serve, is they are intensive, and believe it or not, they do take some time off here and there. So and it's part of the process to gain that trust and have the team gain trust with the people we serve. So there is that sharing aspect. I'll answer my perspective, and what I've learned is we meet the needs and the people where they're at. And I used to always call it a trombone. Is they need a lot, you hold that trombone slide right here, and as they grow and need less and less, you slide it out, and then you slide it back if crisis or whatever happens. So it's that process of being where they need us to be. That's my answer. I'll see how close.
If I may, when you attach that term chronic to a person that's homeless, that's your anticipated journey. It's going to be a chronic journey for that person to get into a house, into housing. So when you attach that term chronic with someone, that's your anticipated journey, getting them successfully in the front door of where you housing. So you need to anticipate all of these obstacles, all of these hurdles, all of these different creative events that happen to their lives. But that's the work and that's the journey that you as a case manager or whoever should anticipate when these individuals are chronically homeless. It's not just okay, we're going to sit there and you're going to be fitted into a unit. No. It's a long chronic process where these individuals are chronically homeless.
Yeah. And labels are dangerous things.
That's right. That's why
I'm opposed to the word homeless. I mean, it creates an otherness to it.
Change the language.
Yeah.
We should change our attitude.
It does. It does. I want to respond though to this issue of is it forever, or as the band member here said with the trombone. I love that metaphor because it captures the relapse piece of it, because people have, let's say a severe mental illness or addiction, and there's relapse in both of those conditions. And so it does lessen and the intensity goes. For some people, I would say graduation is, because we used to have graduation ceremonies because they really want to celebrate that. They don't need case management anymore. So graduation is graduating from services, but people will still need the voucher because they're still poor. So because it's an apartment and the services are separate from the housing, the graduation is, Veronica or Joe stop showing up. And in graduation ceremonies I've been, we invite people for lunch and acknowledge that, and who shows up are people I've not met before, which are people in their families or a significant other. It's like we've been replaced by real people. and I think the graduation is often that reconnection.
Part of that graduation is healing after graduation. There is a healing process from my own experience, healing process from the street.
Yes.
It's time to heal when you have your home.
Yes. And also the graduation is in steps. I mean, like from a lot of visits, and you celebrate every step of the way. But I think that's a big part of it. But I also want to say, for some people, they don't have family, you know, and then we become their family, really. I mean, I've also been to funerals besides graduations, and you're crying because somebody you know for years has died. Somewhere there's a blurring of the line. It's not like, you know, abstract. You know, it's this friend you've lost. So it's all of that. You gotta like high intensity and real in this job.
My question is in regards to case management. You talked about looking for apartments and applying for various ones. My question is, are you directing that client which apartment to take, or are you allowing them to make the choice?
Oh yeah, no, there's a choice. I mean, you have a few options in that general, you know, rental market area. And you say, you know, we can see a few places and you pick one you like. But my experience is that most people can't believe in getting an apartment, and they usually take the first one and say, you don't have to, you know. It's like, no, I'm good here. Can I stay? You know? Oh no, right? I mean, you could, yeah.
We do a lot of showings and go to a lot of showings and that type of thing, so they have the selection we can provide for them. And I again point to our housing specialists really helping us do that.
You know, it's an important thing, not just like in terms of customer satisfaction, but if the person is choosing it, your housing stability rate as a program is going to be higher, because it's not like something they feel like they were placed into or had to take this. This is like theirs, you know, and even small things like ordering the furniture, you know, they're making a home. They're not being placed in housing. They're making their home.
Thank you. I think that's important and helps them be all the more successful.
Yes, and there's an investment. You know, they're paying 30%. It's like, this is my place. Like, I care about it. I'm going to take care of it. And we're always like, oh, you got to stop drinking to get into housing. Some people get into housing like, I'm going to get a hold of this drinking because I want to hold on to this place.
And the reality is there are some homeless people who are afraid of not succeeding.
So, oh, I'm sorry.
And so honestly, that to bring that out, they're afraid. Because they have been chronically homeless, in their life. They're afraid that they don't have to do anything.
We are at time, so I'm just going to say thank you all. Amazing, amazing work. Thank you to the community for coming out and being engaged and spending this amount of time. I also have to give a huge shout out to these folks, the rest of the team, as well as Emma and Aurora and Ashley, who are also members of our department. The level of organization and how seamless this worked, at least for me, it was unbelievable. And it's hard work.